Our next speaker, the Swainwell Partner Speaker Series, is Lieutenant Colonel Cecil Bronson, who has a fascinating talk to give about his experience in Vietnam as a POW. Let me tell you a little bit about Lieutenant Colonel Cecil Bronson, who is here with his lovely daughter, Angela. Please let me know if you can't hear us. Lieutenant Colonel Bronson is a 1970 graduate of the University of Memphis, what is now University of Memphis, but back then it was Memphis State University. He received his commission in the Air Force through the ROTC at Memphis State. While on his honeymoon, he received orders for active duty assignment, assigning him to the navigator training at Mather Air Force Base in California. In February of 1972, Lieutenant Colonel Bronson received an operational assignment to the 34th Tactical Fighter Squadron at Korat, Thailand, for a combat mission in Southeast Asia. While at Korat flying the F-4 Phantom, he logged 160 combat missions and more than 380 hours of combat time. On October 12, 1972, Lieutenant Colonel Brunson's plane was shot down while on a mission over North Vietnam. He was captured and held prisoner by the North Vietnamese. After his release, Lieutenant Colonel Brunson returned to America, where he was selected for pilot training. He graduated with top honors and was awarded the Air Training Command Commander's Trophy for Outstanding Graduate. He received an assignment back to the F-4 Phantom training initially at George Air Force Base before going on to his operational assignment at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina. In March 1980, Lieutenant Colonel Bronson was reassigned from the Air Force and returned to Memphis with his wife Jean and two children, Kevin and Angela. He joined the Tennessee Air National Guard, this time flying the C-130. In August of 1986, he saw his dream come true as he began his career with FedEx, flying the Boeing 727, the Airbus A300, and the A310, and the DC-10, and finally the Boeing 777. In 1991, he retired from the Tennessee Air National Guard with his 21 years of military service, and in 2010, he retired from FedEx as Boeing 777 captain. I may have thrown an extra 7 in there, but anyway, you get the idea. Yeah. The plane, culminating in a 25-year civilian aviation career. And let me tell you some of the awards that he's received. The Silver Star, 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, the Bronze Star for Valor, 2 Purple Hearts, 13 Air Medals, the Air Force Commendation Medal, the Prisoner of War Medal, the South Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry, and Lieutenant Colonel Brunson is credited with 1 MiG-19 destroyed over North Vietnam. On November 3rd, 2018, not too long ago, Lieutenant Colonel Brunson was inducted into the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame. Now you've heard enough from me. Let's welcome Lieutenant Colonel Cecil Bronson.
I'll be starting us off. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. I just want to give you an idea of the POW experience, because he'll just give you his experience. I've collected a lot of photographs, artwork by the actual POWs themselves that will give you an idea of what they went through. The North Vietnamese constantly touted that they provided humane and lenient treatment to the POWs. So I'm going to show you what they really did and see if you agree. They released a lot of staged photos, a lot of propaganda videos showcasing that this alleged treatment that was supposed to be so great. And they did, at the time, manage to dupe most of the world, especially celebrities like Hanoi Jane Fonda and Joan Baez. But I'm going to let you guys be the judge. So after ejecting from a plane, okay, sorry. After ejecting from a plane at about 600 miles per hour, most of the pilots that were shot down were severely injured. They parachuted into hostile territory. They felt bullets whizzing past them as they came down. Those who were lucky enough to survive were greeted by angry militiamen like this, with guns and machetes, ready to kill them. Many of them never made it out of the villages alive. If they did make it out alive, then they were trekked through the jungle toward the capital. Those who were unfortunate enough to land in the south would be marching without shoes or proper nutrition or anything for months, sometimes even years. Many of them would suffer from malaria and other ailments, and they would survive mostly off of live frogs and bugs, which sounds just lovely. If they were really lucky along the way, they might get to stay in some bamboo cages, so you at least had a roof and a floor, which provided a minimal help, protection from the elements. But once they actually reached Hanoi, most of them were taken to the infamous Hanoi Hilton. This is an aerial view of the Hanoi Hilton. You've probably heard of it before, right? So then they were suddenly trapped in a dungeon, and they had no hope of escape. Windows were bricked up, so they would bake in the summer, freeze in the winter, and most of them started alone in a tiny cell, and some of the men were in solitary confinement for more than 5 years. By the way, we consider that cruel and unusual, not okay punishment here in America. Yeah. The beds, which were either a concrete slab or a piece of wood, had these shackles fitted on them that were fitted for the smaller stature of the Vietnamese. For the Americans, who were typically much larger, it would cut straight through the bone, and they would leave them on there for months at a time. Where they couldn't get out of them, they would have to go to the bathroom on themselves, wherever they were. It was horrible. The amenities included in their stay, I use that word lightly, were a straw mat to sleep on, a mosquito net, a threadbare blanket, and a metal cup. Their facilities were a rusty metal bucket. The prisoners wore one-size-fits-all pajamas and nice little rubber sandals that basically were just putting a tire on the bottom of your feet. As the prisons got more crowded, numerous men were stuffed into the small cells where they lived together. They had no privacy. The light bulb was on 24 hours a day. The only visitors they had were giant rats and giant bugs, which they would gratefully eat. By 1970, larger cells, this is actually one of them, were filled with up to 50 men, leaving each man in there no more than 19 inches of space. How wide do you think your chair is? Just thinking, you're sleeping and living with these people up on you all the time. Then you have the Hanoi March. The prisoners were marched through the city as guards riled up the citizens, encouraging them to attack the Americans with whatever they could find. So bottles, wooden shoes, anything you could throw at them. Many of them were knocked unconscious, carried along by the person who was chained to them along the way. The men were also forced to write confessions of the wrongdoings that they had against the Vietnamese. If they refused, they would be beaten with either rifle butts or rubber hoses like you find in a car that they would use until their skin was literally ripped from their bodies. And sleep deprivation was also really common. They would also keep the men awake for weeks at a time. You go crazy in that amount of time. You forget who you are in that amount of time. If the prisoners still did not comply, which most of them considered treason, they would undergo just unspeakable torture. This picture right here depicts the rope trick. You might have heard of it. It's one of North Vietnam's favorite methods. The guards would tie your arms behind your back and then pull them up until your shoulders popped out of their sockets. I'm especially sensitive to that pain that would cause right now. The people who went through it said that they just prayed for death as it happened. Once they had your arms, they would push on your back until you couldn't breathe, and they would hold you there until you would say, "I give up, I'll do whatever you want." See that right there? That's still in the Hanoi Hilton Museum. That is a meat hook. That's where they hung the worst guys, by their arms behind their heads, backwards. There were a few other camps as well. This one right here is the zoo, and my father, who's about to speak, got to stay at both the Hanoi Hilton and the zoo, and he's about to tell you his experience.
A little easier to do this. When I graduated from Southside High School, there were about 10,000, or tens of thousands of Americans already involved in the Vietnam War. When I graduated from Memphis State University, hundreds of thousands of Americans were already involved. Remember when I graduated from Memphis State, I had a diploma in one hand, had a commission as a second lieutenant in the Air Force in the other hand. I got married to my beautiful bride here a few weeks later. And while we were on our honeymoon, I got orders to active duty. I spent 2 years on doing training, and I found myself on my way to Vietnam in an F-4 Phantom II jet fighter. You know, I really wasn't worried about it. I knew what war was all about. I'd seen all the movies. I'd seen John Wayne storming the hills of Iwo Jima and Jimmy Stewart flying his B-29 through the flak-infested skies of Germany. I'd seen Vic Morrow leading his platoon through war-torn Europe. So I knew what war was all about. These guys hardly ever got a scratch on them. They were always there for that next sequel, that next movie. What was there to worry about? But when I got to Vietnam, I found something entirely different. I found that war is cold, it's heartless. There's cruelty, there's hatred, there's not much good about war, but sometimes you have to do it. When I got to Vietnam, I remember my first combat mission. You'll never forget the first time you go into combat. I'm sure that those of you who have done that understand that. It was a simple mission. It was a flight of 4 F-4s, loaded down with 12 500-pound bombs each. The target was a suspected ammo dump on top of a mountain in the Girl War region of Laos. We took off, we were number 3 in the formation, got to the target area. Number 1 rolls in, number 2 rolls in. By the time number 2 is just about to drop his bombs, the lead's bombs are going off. And I think that's what woke the gunners up. Because as we rolled in on the target, tracers started flashing by our cockpit, golf ball-sized tracers flashing by. We jeeped going down the chute to avoid the tracers. We dropped our bombs and pulled off. And as I looked back, the whole mountaintop was erupting in flame. Bombs going off, secondary explosions. It was an amazing, horrific sight. And that's when I noticed that my hands were shaking, and my throat was so dry I couldn't speak. And I think that's when I learned what fear was. While I was in Vietnam, I flew 160 missions. I flew every kind of mission you can imagine. Dropping bombs, dropping napalm, strafing with troops in contact, MidCap, SARCAP, BARCAP, night escort gunship missions, hunter-killer missions with the wild weasels going after SAM sites, fast fact missions in Route Pack 1. I did just about everything you could imagine over there. But October 12th, 1972, my life changed. It was just another mission over the north. I'd already flown 60 times up there, so it wasn't anything new. Our target this day was going to be the Kep Ha Rail Yards, which is about 15 miles northeast of Hanoi. Took off. We were escorting bombers this day. Took off, refueled over Laos, went over the Gulf of Tonkin, refueled over the Gulf of Tonkin, met up with the bombers and started headed inbound to target. As we headed inbound, we got the same indications we always got. The radar homing warning raw gear was lighting up. It was telling us that all the radars were looking at us. The GCI, which controlled the MiGs, the SAMs, the AAA, they all knew we were coming. Got in over the target area. The weather was terrible. Layered clouds up to 20,000 feet. And as we got to the target area, they realized they couldn't drop their bombs, and so we turned outbound to the east to head back over the Gulf of Tonkin, just north of Haiphong. But as we started this turn, I looked up, and 10 o'clock high, there were two MiGs coming down on the formation, two enemy fighters. We reversed our turn to engage the MiGs, and we were just seconds away from firing on these two MiG-21s when a third MiG entered the fight at our deep 6 o'clock position behind us, fired a missile, and impacted our plane. There was a loud explosion. The plane pitched forward and began to cartwheel through the sky. And it just took seconds for us to realize that our plane was dead. And at 23,000 feet at 500 miles an hour, 15 miles from Hanoi, we pulled the ejection handles. And everything started slowing down. I don't know what, I guess that's the adrenaline flowing through you, but I remember precisely what happened. As the canopy rolled off, as the rocket motor propelled me out of the plane, as I watched the plane falling away and the front canopy coming off, and Joe, the front seater, ejecting. And then we began to free fall from 23,000 down to 10,000 feet, where the seat automatically deploys and deploys the parachute. Went through layer after layer of clouds until 6,000 feet. And at that point, I broke out and I could see Hanoi in the distance. And I knew it was going to be a long day. Got down to the ground, and when I hit the ground, I was totally exhausted. The adrenaline had flown through me, and there was nothing left, and I laid there. Finally got enough energy to release my parachute risers, and then to be able to crawl, and then to walk, and then to run. And I got probably 300 yards away from where I landed, probably another 200 yards from where I saw the plane land, which was exploding. Found a thicket of thorn bushes and crawled up under it, and plotted my escape out of North Vietnam. Where I was, there was going to be no rescue because it was too dangerous. And I knew it would be up to me if I was going to be rescued. So I plotted my escape to the northeast. To the planet. I thought if I could make it to the coast, about 30 miles away, just south of the Chinese border of the Campfire Mines, which is kind of a deserted area, that I could use my radios and talk to somebody and get them to come and extract me. So I got out from under this thorn bush, began my E&E to the northeast around villages and population centers. And I've been doing this for 2 or 3 hours, and then I began to hear gunshots in the distance and people shouting. And I figured it's time to hide. So I found a small valley with some tall grass in it, and I got down the tall grass and pulled it up around me and began to wait. Within 10 minutes, I began to see on the hillsides around me just hundreds of people just shoulder width apart looking for me. As they got closer and closer, as close as from me to you, he saw me in the grass, pulled his pistol up and unloaded his pistol on me. And I could feel the bullets whipping past me, but they didn't hit me. They swarmed over and began to beat me with rifle butts, with bamboo rods, hit me with combat boots. And I was just about unconscious when a couple of NVA troops came and pulled people off of me. They sliced my clothes off of me with a machete. They tied my elbows and my wrists together behind me and began to walk me to a nearby village. And all on the way, hundreds of people were lined up the pathway